Welcome to Do Theology, where we keep doctrine in its place.
I'm Jeremy, and I'm in Utah.
And I'm Ken, hanging out in Indiana.
Today, we have for you an interview with the hardest working man in podcast land, the producer of the Just Thinking podcast, the host of the BAR Podcast, Biblical and Reformed, Dawain Atkinson. And we talk with Dawain about his journey to where he is now theologically. He's been involved in different movements, and so we get some background on that. We talk about the Just Thinking podcast. We talk about critical race theory. It's an interesting conversation that you'll want to check out. And speaking of that Just Thinking podcast, we're going to go ahead and tease this again. Maybe there's some bonus stuff coming down the pipeline that you want to keep an eye out for. Maybe. Just maybe.
Just maybe.
Just thinking, just maybe. And also,
they were the winners of our tournament.
True. Yes. We had a March Madness tournament of podcasts and YouTube channels. Just Thinking won. Beat out James White in the final. Impressive showing from those boys. But also want to mention, too, we talked to Dawain off the record after our interview with him, and we're talking about how he got his podcast growing and got his name out there more. And one of the things that he did, we're just going to straight up copy off of, he had put the word out on his podcast that if anyone was going to the G3 conference, he would hook them up with some merch so that way they could be living billboards and advertisements at the G3 conference because, of course, that's like the prime audience for podcasts like his and ours. Well, Ken and I are going to the G3 conference later this year, here in 2021, and we want to offer you some stuff. If you're going, if you're a listener to this podcast and you want to help us get the word out about the Do Theology podcast at the G3 conference, let us know. Send us an email at show@dotheology.com, or you can send us a message on Facebook. That might even be easier. Go to our Facebook page and just send us a message and just say, hey, I'm going to G3, and we'll start that conversation. That would be really helpful for us. So let us know about that, and we'd love to meet you.
And you'll get some free merch. It's helpful for us, and you get free merch.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and we'd love to meet you while we're at G3. Maybe we could share a coffee and do theology together.
That would be great.
So, okay, well, without any further ado, let's go ahead and roll the intro and get into the interview with Mr. Dawain Atkinson.
Neither Bethel nor Hillsong meet the biblical definition of a true church.
Did you know that Jesus was born again?
Is his view heretical?
If it isn't, then there's no such thing as heresy.
It's not just a black and white issue. There's a question of moderation and how damaging and how harmful things are.
Not every act of divine revelation is equal in authority.
Angelic forces, angelic reinforcement.
I mean, it's hard to even respond to that, isn't it? It's mind-numbing. It's blasphemous.
When the apostles use the word atonement, they do not depict an angry God.
It's cryptic, it's watered down, it has nothing to do with the judicial aspect of the Christian gospel.
The most important of all doctrines is that the Bible is the Word of God.
They have different ideas than you do. You don't have to automatically kick them out of the kingdom.
Joining us today is the executive producer of the Just Thinking podcast, host of the BAR Podcast, and CEO of the BAR Podcast Network. The BAR Podcast Network is home to several widely listened to podcasts, including Just Thinking and Thankful Homemaker. You can listen to these and learn more about the BAR Podcast Network by going to thebarpodcast.com. We welcome our guest, the hardest working man in podcast land and huge Duke basketball fan, Dawain Atkinson.
You see, okay. I ain't even. Those that are listening, that are not watching, he see this huge North Carolina Tar Heel blue, God's country blanket behind me. No way, I'm a Duke fan. I'm saved, so I don't. You know, Devils. Like, why would I root for a Devil? Like, come on.
Hey, that's a good point. You can make a good argument for that.
Oh yeah, guy has a ram in the bush. You know, he takes
Oh man. Hey, Dwayne, on your Twitter profile, you've got that header image up there that's got the hashtag hardest working man in podcast land, and by golly, I believe it. You produce that widely listened to Just Thinking podcast. You host or co-host several podcasts of your own. You're the CEO of a podcast network. You certainly have your hands full. What's the thinking behind that hashtag, and how does that play out in your life besides just simply having your hands in a lot of podcasts?
Sure. So it actually was self-proclaimed, I'll be honest first. But it was, adopted by Daryl Harrison, which is the king of the monikers. Anybody know Omaheezy? And everybody else on the team has nicknames. And so that's what made it official. And it came from, before there was a network. And it was just the BAR podcast. I literally would do, 2-a-days, 3-a-day interviews, to stay ahead, to, always promoting. And what that looks like, I guess, just in every aspect of my life, that's kind of my drive. One of my biggest heroes, of course, is Michael Jordan. And one of his mottos is, "You're not going to outwork me." And so that's the same attitude that I approach, not just podcasting, but work and everywhere else, man. So And it's a long hashtag, and I love typing it all out because you just can't say hardest working man in podcast. You got to add land to it to put some more letters on it. But it also kind of comes from James Brown was the hardest working man in showbiz or whatever. So I had to make my rhyme: hardest working man in podcast land.
Awesome, I love it. So the BAR Podcast Network, and for those listening that may not be familiar, that's not about alcohol, right? BAR stands for Biblical and Reformed. Tens of thousands of listeners glean from the shows on the network on a regular basis. Tell us how God has used this network in your life.
So on a personal level, it holds me accountable because it has put me in a place and in spaces where I'm noticeable. The whole thing about the BAR podcast is I'm not a pastor. I'm not a best-selling author. I'm a lay person, and, that inspired other people to start. But what the BAR podcast and the network has done is put me in a realm or a place where people pay attention to what I do. I just can't act crazy, because my name is attached to it, the brand and all of that. That's been the major part. Because we are sinners, left by ourselves, not saying I don't sin. It's just, you think twice about certain ones, but also a blessing in my life. Just the ability to connect with people, man. I am passionate about making new friends, about connecting with people, and to see the BAR podcast do that on a international level is a true, just amazing blessing that I'm so grateful for.
Now, at one point in your life, you were just this North Carolina country boy, and you were caught up in wayward Christian movements. You spent some time in the Charismania type camp, and then you said that you became a hardcore fundamental King James only guy.
Yes.
So how have your different religious experiences helped shape your approach to podcasting and to ministry today?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I like that. So just my journey, like you said, hardcore. I'm surprised you didn't mention the apostle thing, which probably coming up. Going from the New Apostolic Reformation to, like I said, hardcore fundamentalist, and that transition came from being tired of the manipulation and false prophets and things like that. And I'm like, we're going over here. This one book, whatever. But to answer your question, how that shaped my podcast, is actually the inspiration for my podcast, because it took podcasts to expose me to solid biblical teaching. And so I wanted my podcast to be that bridge to expose people to solid biblical teaching. No, we're not, White House in or Christ-centered, where we're talking about VOD and VOS and words I don't know how to pronounce, but we're that bridge between people that maybe there's something not right about this charismania thing, but this guy, he's talking plain. He's not, a super scholar. He's telling me about this guy and this guy. And that's kind of the inspiration, man. So that journey shaped my inspiration to actually produce the podcast.
Now, when you held that title of apostle for that time in your life, how long was that? How long of a period?
It's hard to say. It was probably officially about maybe a year and a half, before I started like not answering to it. People still call me that in that circle when they see me, and I have just Dwayne, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably about a year and a half, when I was in it and proud of it, and then I was kind of coming out.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is during that time, how puffed up was your head? Could you like even fit through doorways as people were over here calling you Mr. Apostle?
Right. So, it's funny, man, because you get this false sense of humility, because you're like, I'm not worthy to be apostle, but call me an apostle, or I'm not worthy, but I'm gonna put it in my Twitter description, it's kind of, like I said, it's like a false sense of humility. Oh, sorry. Do y'all hear that? Okay. All right, good. So yeah, it's kind of like a false sense of humility, man. And I am, I always tell people when it first hit me, I was kind of like, like this is too much. But when you get in those circles and you get pumped up and people, are pumping you up and doing that, man, you're on your own little cloud, man. You feel like you can, your shadow will heal somebody when you walk by.
Yeah, like a church rock star. You were the charismatic. You were the Pentecostal Mick Jagger.
Exactly.
So that's some of the church experience that you've had in the past. What's your church experience like now, and how would you compare and contrast that to your earlier days?
Sure. So we actually just relocated to North Carolina, and we're in a pandemic, so we haven't locked down a official church home. Sunday, we're excited to actually finally attend a church. So we've been virtual for the last couple. But what I'll say is when I was in South Carolina, after I experienced, sound biblical teaching and things like that, I was still in a charismatic church. It was a smaller church. The pastor is a great person, but his theology was just off. Like he wasn't into manipulating and, taking people money and things like that. But, he still was decreeing and declaring and things. And so I was there after I started the bar, started the network, and I would be in there literally cringing, because it's, but from being in that world and being a part of that world, and then actually still in that world, but not necessarily a part of it, it's taught me a lot of patience. A lot of times when we get sound biblical theology, we are impatient with folks, when they're not where we are. We're like, you got to get here, we call it the cage stage. But I think with me staying there and having that conversation, with my pastor at the time, like, hey, you should read this guy Spurgeon, man. You should check it out, and then he started talking about grace. But, grace, and, you make sure you're not an antinomian, so kind of having that input there taught me a lot about that. But like I said, by God's grace, we'll be attending Berean Baptist Church on this Sunday. We've been following them online, and then hopefully we can get some interaction, because it's funny because I haven't had the real church experience as far as like eldership and things like that, that I know I need, but it's just the journey that I'm on.
So where were you living before you moved back to North Carolina? Where have you been?
Yeah, I was in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
I was there for about 15 years. And like if you read my bio, when I first got there, I was at Redemption World Outreach Center with Ron Carpenter, one of the TBN preachers. I was actually attending his church when I first got there.
Okay. And are you back around your hometown now? You back in the Turkey?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm about 45 minutes from Turkey. My parents, the house I grew up in is about 40 minutes from where I'm living right now.
Okay. Are you closer to the coast then, or
yes.
What direction?
Yes, I'm closer to the coast.
My wife and I honeymooned at Wrightsville Beach.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's the only time I've ever been in North Carolina.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Wrightsville is amazing. I call that the rich part though. So
that's why we were in and out for a week. That was it, man. We couldn't live there. So
yeah, man. Yeah, no, I'm probably about an hour from Wilmington.
Okay.
And when I lived in Turkey, we beach was a Sunday afternoon every day. I mean, every week kind of thing.
Wow. Well, as we mentioned about the network, the BAR network, it hosts the Just Thinking podcast with Daryl Harrison and Virgil Walker. Omaha. I'm assuming that was Daryl's moniker, right, for him?
It is, of course.
and Thankful Homemaker and a variety of other shows. And there's been a great amount of growth over the last year or two, it seems like, for the BAR Network. How are people finding these shows, and why are they drawn to the conversations that are taking place over on the BAR Network?
Yeah, so we, by God's grace, man, we've touched a lot of spectrums when it comes to podcasts. Because you think about podcasts, it's all about a niche, and so I purposely found people that were in different areas or touch different demographics. And so all of these people already had their own following. Like they had people that they already, followed. And what the network does is the network actually exposes more people to this set of folks, so let's say Thankful Homemaker, she already had, man, like, ladies love podcasts. So she already had like a whole bunch of ladies following her when she joined the network. It just took the ladies that were following my podcast and the ladies that were following Just Thinking podcast and the ladies that were following this podcast. Yeah. Oh, there's another lady podcast. So boom, boom, boom. And we actually was able to see that magnified with the latest addition to the network, Abide. They actually debuted at number 12 on the Christian category on iTunes because they had their following, and then you added that to the cross promoting. So I don't know if I answered that question right, but
that was good, man.
Okay.
Yeah, and speaking of the top podcast on the Christian chart, like on Apple Store and stuff, that can be a real depressing place, can it? To see what's most popular.
It is, man. It is. It is very depressing. And it's always good to see a good guy up there every now and again.
Yeah.
So I want to ask this question because I saw you had you tweeted the picture of the shirt that's in your merch store with it's a picture of Charles Spurgeon holding up that word "no."
Yeah, man.
Which just even without context, I find that shirt hilarious and awesome. But I wonder if there's a story behind it that has brought it to your store.
Well, honestly, it's good old capitalism. It was a meme going around. I think the more popular one was something saying showing respect to transgender by peeing while sitting, and then it was like Charles Spurgeon, no. And so I felt like, hey, this might be a thing. It's kind of like the Bernie thing. The Charles Spurgeon no was going around. Nobody else had it. My wife fussed at me about copyright and all of that stuff, and I was like, well, we ain't gonna make $1 million from it, so we threw it in the store.
Awesome. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Spurgeon's family can't see you anyway. They're Christians. we're coming up on 1 Corinthians 6 this Sunday in our church, so we'll be addressing that. And I think it was just yesterday you tweeted out a picture of Grudem's updated systematic theology with the caption, "Podcast perks. Thank you, Wayne Grudem." How often are you getting free swag, and how do we get in on that? What's the story there?
Well, I get it pretty often, surprisingly. Just building the platform to a place where people want to come through and get exposed to your listeners, and they're grateful for that exposure. And so the interns send you stuff, or you can just be like me and just ask for it. I think
that's cool.
While I was recording with Wayne, I mentioned, I was like, man, I got the old one, but I would really love the new one. He was like, oh yeah, just give me your address. Oh, no problem. I was typing it as we were still on the Yeah, man. But it's a blessing. It's actually one of the reasons why I jumped into podcasting, just to be totally honest and transparent, man, because you're giving them something valuable, and in turn, they're blessing you, man. I mean, I wish I was a avid reader. I like reading, but I'm not like a hardcore guy that 4 or 5 books a month or anything. But that's one of the great things about it, just getting those little books mainly from people that come on the show.
Well, to take things in a slightly different direction here, the day and age in which we're living in, we're seeing huge ideological shifts taking place across America. And you, as a Black Reformed Christian in America who speaks against things like critical theory, you often find yourself in the minority on a variety of occasions. Is it difficult for you to always seemingly to be in these underdog fights all the time?
No, not at all. I'm actually the founder for a Facebook page called Be Not Deceived. If you ever see that on Facebook, I started that in 2012. I've always been against the grain guy. That's just my nature. I just think back, when people playing music in the cars, like I would never play the radio jam. Like I'm gonna play the album hits. And so that's just my nature, man. If I see a biblical truth, if I see a right, I don't care where they stand, who stands with me, who don't stand with me. I'm gonna say I'm gonna stand. And that's why just thinking is a thing, because when I heard, Virgil, when I heard Daryl in their position, I was like, yes, this is where I stand, and I have no issues standing there, even if it's alone. And the flip side of that, because that can be tricky, having that kind of a mindset. And the flip side of that, if what I believe is the majority, I'm still going to believe it if it's scriptural. Like I know guys that were talking against social justice, and then when Dr. MacArthur started talking against it, then they flipped on him. And I'm like, well, it's still not, you know what I mean? Like it's still a thing. Like don't do it because it's popular now. So yeah, I have no issue standing. My best friend is my wife. Long as she's cool, I'm cool. I actually posted yesterday, and it's actually a Jay-Z verse, but the whole industry can hate me. I'll thug my way through. It's all good.
So now in the real world, how does that play itself out? Like in your social circles with friends that you've had for a long time, going back to your BC days, and with your family? Are you an against the grain guy in all those relationships too? I
am, and they know it. It is adamantly clear. When they are bashing Trump and I come around like, hey, what's that? What's the facts on that? Can we Google this? Can we look up what he actually said versus what you heard somebody said that he said last week when they was talking to their cousin? Let's look at that. So they know it. I've been this way, man. I've been this guy. They're very familiar. My parents, my siblings, my friends, and that's anybody outside of that, you're really on the short list of if I care what you think kind of thing.
You're engaged in a lot of conversations about a lot of different topics these days. I'm be curious to hear from you what topics you find to be most significant and the hottest topics right now outside of issues of critical theory.
That's the hottest one, man. Just to be honest, outside of that, there really isn't, honestly, like, because I'm not really, yeah, that's a great question. I like
you were just at Founders, right? You just went to the Founders Conference. Was there any buzz there outside of it, or there's critical race theory? I mean, I know it's broader than just race, but is critical theory really just consuming everything right now?
It's becoming a lot of everybody's conversation, unfortunately. And the segments that Daryl and Virgil did, it dealt with that. A lot of their invitations is dealing with that because it's coming is really blanketing the church as far as their not knowing what it is, fear of it, misunderstanding of it, or embracing it. So these things are really it is really the only conversations that I've been a part of. I used to be in some of the continuationist to sensationist conversations, but literally in the last 6 or 7 months it's all been about critical race or social justice, things like that. So
do the podcast stats reflect that too? Things that are on critical theory, do those spike?
Sure. Yeah. George Floyd and the gospel put us on the map. That episode right now has 200,000 downloads by itself. I know podcasts that don't have that many total. That episode put us on the map. What I do love though is once people discover us, they see that we talk about more than just race. We have a meeting every Tuesday as a team, Just Thinking Team. And that's one of the things we talk about is, people finding us and then finding where you talk about more than just, critical theory or social justice or things like that. We have a really, really good catalog of just some evergreen content, like the Assurance of Salvation. That was a phenomenal episode. biblical unity, which kind of touched on it, but it was, more or less like, okay, let's look at what the Bible say about unity. So.
Yeah, and it seems like in recent years, there's been more of a focus on theological movements, like finding yourself in a broader reform type movement, like the G3 Conference Network, for example, is kind of a movement in and of itself rather than a full-on proper denomination as we've known it in church history.
Right.
And as someone who has your thumb on the pulse of these things a little bit, do you think these movements are helpful? And what do you think the future of these movements is going to be? Like, where's all this headed in the American church?
Sure. So I think the movements have their positive side for sure, but because it goes back to when you see a name and you know what to expect. When you say G3 to me, I think, okay, this is family local church. When you say Ligonier, I think RC, scholarly teaching. When you say Grace to You, I think line upon line preaching. Solid preaching or whatever, or solid biblical expositing. And so, like you said, these are all kind of like movements. I think as far as where we're going with that, I have a fear that, like you said, it's not necessarily churches or denominations like in the past. I have a fear that these movements may I guess kind of take the place of that. Like people consider themselves I'm a Ligonierian, or I'm a G3ian, so that's kind of my fear. I don't know if we'll ever get to that extreme. The people that are in leadership, I know everybody in all three of those places. And the people that are in leadership all are continually trying to point people back to their local church and continue to give them resources, for that. But if, for whatever reason it sways in any other direction, I could see that being an issue.
Now, as these theological movements take shape and there are lines drawn in the sand on certain issues, because there are things that unite these ministries, obviously,
right.
Which I've written about on my website about they're cessationist, they're Calvinistic, and probably biggest thing is they oppose the social justice movement.
Right.
But as these things happen, we're seeing more and more Christian famous, air quotes, Christian famous men and women like Lecrae and Beth Moore say some of the craziest things. Mm-hmm. How do you process such falls from orthodoxy as people are showing where they stand on these issues?
Man, it's very disheartening. It's very discouraging. I feel like I was at the cusp of this happening. I interviewed Jamar Tisby, which is the, founder of Witness and formerly ran Reform African American Network. I interviewed him the week before President Trump was elected. And he said during that interview, hey, if Trump get elected, things are going to change. And I didn't understand what he was talking about. If you timestamp it back, after President Trump was elected, we literally, that's when he came out with saying he wasn't comfortable with, worshiping with white people. And then, it just continued to build and build. And then the MLK 50 was that same year. Right. And that just broadened the line even more. So it's disheartening so much. But what we have to understand is, and some of those movements have to also understand is that's not, it's not heretical to the point of lost salvation or, you're no longer a brother, sister in Christ, even though some of those movements are saying right now they're not brothers, sisters in Christ. I don't fall in that. I fall in, this is a blind spot for you. This is a spot where you missed it. There's a spot somewhere over here that I missed it, but this is yours. So from it, I think it's disheartening, those that take it to the point of trying to twist scripture to support it, that's when, to me, you're getting into the little heretical side. But, there are a lot of them that have big names, and really the big names come from other people's influences. Like Beth Moore didn't come at that by herself. Somebody approached her with that she respected, and she ran with it. Lecrae didn't come up with that by herself. That's a mixture between somebody talking to them about it. And then, Black people default a lot of times is victimhood. Unfortunately, you have to unlearn that, because a lot of times your parents experience stuff that you would never experience, and then when they put that in you, then you default to that, and everything you do is to that manner, until you deprogram or you understand, I'm in the image of God. I can do anything I want to do. Ain't no systematic racism, or if he say no, I can go over here and say yes. So there's a lot of facets to it, man. Just understanding these folks and where they stand. Again, I still call them brothers and sisters. Beth just don't need to preach, but other than that, I call them brothers and sisters.
Some might say she needs to go home.
Well, yeah, go home and sit down and all of that stuff. But other than that, man, it like I said, it's disappointing. Especially like I never was a Lecrae fan, but to see Shaolin and Jackie Hill, kind of those folks that I admired their music. It's disappointing to see it coming from those.
Since you are a black man, have you experienced?
Oh, really?
Have you experienced other black people using your skin pigment as a weapon in these conversations, trying to influence you? Like, come on, man, like you're one of us. I mean, is that something that you deal with on a regular basis? Because obviously Ken and I are very much outside of that kind of pull. So.
Well, I mean, it's only in Twitter world, man. And, Twitter world it's a fantasy world. People say stuff that they would never say to you face to face. I grew up in the country, where if you're going to say something to somebody, you're going to say it. And then we're going to figure out what we're going to do after the fact. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's my mindset. And my dad, his number one motto is, can they whoop you? Like, no, sir. Well, don't worry about it then. That's what he say. So, you do run into that into Twitter world, that you like, I grew up in the Southeast. I've been called names by white men, in that form, gun cock, get out my store, all of that. But online, I've been called more names from black people than anybody else ever, and so it comes from that whole community think, or because you're black you need to think, and those that know me know that that's never going to be me, no matter what my color is. And it's interesting because I have a son that is 13, and he lives in North Carolina with his mom, and we're now building our relationship, and we have these conversations in the car, and I'm literally like trying to deprogram everything that I just told you about, like think outside the box, man. Don't be a group thinker, man. Look at everybody's perspective. Don't just look from this perspective, man. So to answer your question, yes, you do get it, but it's not like overwhelming. It's just in Twitter world where everything's fake and ain't nobody about to do nothing.
When you're interacting with individuals on a personal level, because it seems like as the further we go in America right now, issues of critical theory are becoming more and more pervasive across all sectors, to where it's coloring the way people view things without them even realizing it. Like they're wearing a pair of glasses and they don't even realize that they're looking through this lens. Where have you found to be the best place to start with just beginning to have those conversations, to get them to just begin to consider other perspectives?
So I mean, podcasters. So first thing I would say, you need to go listen to Just Thinking, man. Like, no. So, and some people receive that well, some people not so much. But I do think just looking for voices that are coming from a different perspective. And that goes both sides. I mean, even on our side of the way we view critical race theory, we need to also hear what they have to say, hear the argument, if not just to weaponize it, but also just to kind of get a better understanding so we can explain our side better. But I always, my default is to send people to podcasts, and send them to some Vody videos, things like that. And really, like you said, start the conversation. Conversation is the start. Like, if you can actually, start a dialogue and just be honest and transparent and hear each other out. Because I found a lot of times in conversations, people start talking and they be like, blah, 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 CRT, and you don't hear nothing else. It's 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Like, okay, I'm waiting for my turn,
Yeah, you're loading the gun before they get done talking.
Exactly.
So the BAR network has got the London Baptist Confession of Faith 1689. That's the official doctrinal statement of the network. But within the different shows that are within the network, there's a level of diversity within the BAR network. How have you guys worked through areas of disagreements on some of those things?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. I kind of built this thing as I was going, just to be honest. And everybody that comes on knows where I stand, and I know where they stand. And we're able to coexist a lot. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of these conferences are able to coexist and bring in, Presbyterian guys, or Reformed Baptist guys. The main focus is the gospel. If you get the gospel right, I don't have no quorums with you, unless you're, heretical when it comes to, the whole decree and declaring. Yeah, like that's a trigger for me. Like that's not going to happen, But anything else, I don't have a Lutheran yet, but if I find a dope Lutheran, they'll definitely be a part, man, because we agree on the gospel, which is essential. Jesus Christ, Son of God, came, lived, died, seated at the right hand of the Father. If we agree there, then everything else, we can just kind of play around with. But there's been no issue. Nobody has forced anything, or like I said, the fact that everybody knows where I stand kind of helps. And it's been no issues so far.
Yeah, there are a few good Lutherans left, aren't there?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I got a list of 3 right now.
Yeah, the serious ones would never ever join a network that had Reformed in the title, right? Well, Jordan Cooper, I think, wouldn't be down for that.
Nah.
So.
No, my 3 favorite Lutherans right now are Chris Roseborough, Chad Burkard, and Steve Kozark.
Okay.
Those are my guys.
Yeah, and what about Flame? Flame a favorite Lutheran now? Did you listen to his last? He released a couple last year, but did you listen to those?
Nope. Sorry.
All right. Hey, you need to check out
some homework, huh?
Extra Nos by Flame.
Okay.
He's left Calvinism and has embraced Lutheranism, and he released, I think, 2 or 3 albums last year, but that one, it made my my list of the best albums of the year, because I'm not a Lutheran, but he walks through the theological issues and explains his thinking. It's very informative from a theological perspective, and it's not the most creative Christian hip hop album there's ever been, but it's interesting. So
sure, yeah, I would love to check it out. I have like I said, no issues with Lutheran as long as they're orthodox and solid in their theology, and they're not like women pastors and trans elders.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it seems like that's the lion's share of Lutheranism today.
Yeah, exactly.
Daryl Harrison, where is he an attender at MacArthur's church? I know he's like the social media dean for Grace to You.
Yes.
Does he attend?
Yeah, he does go. He does attend Grace Community. He's a member there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. And is he where MacArthur is theologically? Is he, I'll just get to it. Is Daryl Harrison dispensational?
That's a great question. I don't know for sure. I don't think so. The church that Daryl left out of Atlanta was SBC. So I don't know, honestly. That
we got to get him on the show and get to the bottom of this.
Well, they might even do a show on it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's a great question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I am not sure about that. That's a great question. Cool. I'm going to have to text him and ask him. Like,
you got to let us know, though, after you do it, man. It's our question.
Yeah,
so,
bro, I think, I'm trying to think back to conversations because we talk so much, but I know Virgil's Amil. I don't know. That's a great question.
And Virgil, did I see that he recently moved, or is he still in Omaha?
So he's actually in transition. He has been named the executive director for G3 Ministries. And so eventually he will be relocating his family to the Atlanta, Georgia area. Right now he's doing like a week there and a week back and things like that.
Wow. And during COVID times, that's really complicated.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Hey, you mentioned a few times about the importance of podcasts in your life and how it has helped shape you a little bit, and how you look to share podcasts with others to encourage them to think through different things. What were some of the key podcasts that you were listening to as you were coming out of some of these other theological movements and moving more into the Reformed world?
Yes, sir. The big three: Truth for Life, Grace to You, and Renewing Your Mind on rotation. Like
Nice.
literally hours and hours. I kept earbuds in my ear all the time.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
I love Alistair Begg, man. He's
yes.
one of a kind.
Yeah, I could listen to him all day long for sure.
Awesome. Okay. Well, just a final question. We ask this question to all of our guests. We find it to be really encouraging and helpful. But what parting encouragement do you have for leaders and lay people in the local church as it pertains to living out their unity in Christ, developing convictions, and avoiding foolish controversies about less important doctrines?
Wow, that's a stacked question there.
Gave you plenty of stuff to address.
Yeah.
I know, right? I guess my encouragement, man, just in this day and age to, stay the course. A lot of times in local ministries, elders and things like that, man, it seems overwhelming, especially now with so many things are uncertain. I just, my encouragement to stay the course, like this is an old church folks saying is keep God first, but they say it, but there's some validity to that, man. A lot of times they get away from their first love, which is, praying and reading God's word, and those are two simple things that we think about as Christians, but these are two things that will keep us grounded, will keep us motivated, will keep us inspired, will keep us driving forward. And it also keeps our, I guess you could say, pulse to the heartbeat of what's going on when it comes to, God's word and just understanding it and walking it out in our lives. So definitely back to the basics when it comes to prayer and scripture, and then stay the course when it comes to just your walk in general. There's going to be pitfalls. There's going to be, stumbles. There's going to be intentional falls, because we a lot of times forget about the intentional falls. We are sinful beings, and we do stuff and we're like, yeah, I shouldn't have did that, but you did do it. So all of these things are going to be in your path, and at the end of the day, it's all for God's glory, for number one, and then for number two, man, that you just live that life and walk that path that gives him that glory.
Amen.
That's a good word. Appreciate it, Dwayne. Thanks for joining us today.
Good deal, man. I'm looking for my wings, man.
Yeah, you made it through. Good job.
Oh man, no, that was good, man. I love the questions. You made me nervous with the inbox. I was like, oh snap, like we gotta be pulling up baby pictures and explain this Instagram picture.